I'll ask that everyone be respectful to the candidates and give others the opportunity to ask questions. And then, as time permits, we will have closing statements and give everybody the opportunity to ask any other questions that they may have. So with that, I did mention there's water. The restrooms are over here in this hallway, and we have 3 exits. So if you need to get out quick, you can do that. Okay, so with that, we'll start with opening statements. I'll ask our incumbent, Supervisor Patrick Jones, if he'd like to.
Richard, could we do the flag salute first?
We certainly can. I appreciate it. Thank you. So if you'll all stand for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much.
Are we good? All right, thank you. Well, thank you, and thanks to the Lakehead Lions Club for hosting this event. We'll have other events, so if you're interested in more forums and debates, we'll have them in Shasta Lake City and in the city of Redding as well. So by the time March 5th comes around, everybody should have a good idea. So I'm Patrick Henry Jones. I grew up here in Shasta County. I've lived in Shasta County for 55 years. I've lived in every district in Shasta County, spending most of my time in District 3 and District 4, depending on every 10 years when they redistrict the lines. I've been moved out and into districts over the years. And of course, I currently live in District 4 in Mountain Gate downhill. Like I said, I grew up here in Shasta County. I went to the local schools, Enterprise High School, Shasta College, Sacramento State University. I have a degree in history. I also have a degree in administration of justice, and I'm post-certified. I served on the Redding City Council for 8 years. I was mayor in 2010, and then I was first elected to the Shasta County Board of Supervisors in 2020. This is, I just completed my 3rd year, and it was an honor for me to serve as chairman of the Shasta County Board of Supervisors this last year. We accomplished a lot in 2023. I'm very proud of the accomplishments that we have, and I look forward to 2024. It's already starting off to be very good. Our first meeting, we terminated all impact fees for Shasta County. That will have huge ramifications, and we'll be doing more things like that throughout the year. So I appreciate you having me here today, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you very much. And my beautiful wife, Lori, is with me as always. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Matt Plummer. See that no one is sitting in the front row, which is unfortunate, but I want to share 3 things in opening. One is a little bit about where I grew up and why Lakehead reminds me of that. Second, kind of the journey of getting me to this point, and then why I decided to run. So I grew up in a small town named Calhoun, which, and I don't know if this is actually true, but what they say is we had a train station in our town, and one day they were writing the name of where that train was going, which was California, on the sign, but they ran out of room, and it stopped at Calhoun. And so they just called the town Calhoun. But Calhoun was 1 square mile big, and I went to a K-8 school with 150 kids. I learned to get along with everybody because you're with the same 19 kids for 9 years. And during that time I actually had something similar to what you've experienced here, where after I had graduated, they tried to shut down the school and merge into a larger school district. And actually the citizens of our community fought back and were able to preserve the school, so it's still standing there today, which I'm proud of. That was a really formative part of my education. So that was where I grew up. And when I came here a few months ago and met Scott and others at the Bass Hall, I was like, the way that you all talk about community is the way that we talked about community in Calhoun. It was like, oh yeah, you know your neighbors. If they need something for a recipe or get stuck, needing help for something, you go over and you ask them. And unfortunately, I think across the country, we're seeing less and less of that. So I think this is a unique place. And it's part of what I loved about where I grew up. So after growing up there, have moved around quite a bit, but I started my career working in a warehouse for a company kind of like Amazon, but for nuts and bolts. And there learned quickly, they threw me into overseeing a packing department and learned learn to work with people, manage people, how to work in the context of a large company. But what I realized, and this was the height of the Great Recession, and as I would walk to my apartment, I would see these empty tool and die shops, these empty machine shops where these people who had built their career and spent 20, 30 years building that business now were gone because the auto industry had collapsed, and it was 2009. And so I started thinking, you know, what does the future of this community look like? What do these people do who have built their whole career on that, and now it's gone? And I realized that what I was thinking about at work was very different from what I wanted to be thinking about, which was these community issues. And so I left there and joined a nonprofit that helped other nonprofits figure out what were they doing that was effective, and then how do we help grow it. So I worked with nonprofits, some you've heard of, YMCA of the USA, to help scale a program across the country that would help people who are at risk of diabetes. Moved here about 8 years ago, and during the first year worked with that nonprofit. But then my wife and I, we had 2 young kids at the time, said, we're gonna stay here, we want to invest in the community. And as I looked around, I said, there aren't a ton of jobs that can become careers for people. And so I said, why don't I start a company here? And so I started a company that would train other companies, nonprofits, and government agencies on how to be productive and efficient, how to use critical thinking to solve problems, and how to manage people. And so that's what I've been doing over the last 6 or 7 years. As with any startup of a company, there's a lot of pivots along the way, and I've learned a lot. And the whole theme along the way of my career has been, what does the community need and how do we address that? So join a nonprofit, start a company, and increasingly over the last few years, it felt like, wow, government is having a huge impact on the issues that our community is facing, both from a policy standpoint of, okay, we're gonna spend X number of millions or billions of dollars, depending at what level it is, and then are we actually seeing that problem get better or worse? And unfortunately, it looked like, particularly as I was looking at the state of California, that things were getting worse. And then also seeing that the culture that was being modeled by political leaders across all sides of the aisle was creating a more hostile, more divisive environment where we didn't feel comfortable talking to our neighbors about, basic issues that were facing us. And so I said, why don't I get involved in government and see if I can contribute positively there and use that as a way to help address the issues that our community is facing. And so over the last 3 years, I've worked on a number of campaigns at the state level, county, working on a school choice ballot initiative, and then most recently for local Reading City Council. And that brought me to November of 2022, where I just finished working with a friend who ran for Reading City Council. And I said, okay, do I support another candidate? Do I take some time off from campaigning? And I felt like as I looked at the challenges that our community is facing, and they're obviously different here than Reading and different there than Shasta Lake, but at homelessness, crime, mental health, addiction, our roads, our infrastructure, that these things were actually trending in the opposite direction. They weren't getting better, that they were getting worse. And so I said, I want to be part of addressing that. I want to see if I can contribute to making progress on those challenges. And so that's why I decided to get into the race and to run. So excited to move on to the rest of the questions. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to, we have a category called general questions for both candidates, and then we get into specific questions. As I mentioned, I'm going to alternate between the questions that were submitted that I'm going to read and the questions that you may have. It may turn out that you have the questions that's on the list, and I'll let you know if that's the case. So we'll start with the first question for both candidates. And we'll start with Supervisor Jones. If elected, what are your top priorities for this next term?
So all of 2023, one of our top priorities, and this was the majority of the board, the Shasta County Board of Supervisors, was building a new jail or working on that. The new jail is roughly around a $125 million project, so it's not an easy project, and that does not include the staffing. So that has been a number one priority. And then also, for the last 6 months, I've been serving with 20 other elected officials at the At Home project, addressing crime, addressing homelessness, and some crime. The At Home program mostly is funded through the city of Reading, and the encampment grant is roughly around an $8 million grant. And we have decided, again, amongst the Anderson, Shasta Lake, City of Reading, and Shasta County all working together, we are now starting the process to build a resource center in the City of Reading. It will be very close to the Good News Rescue mission. And what that will do is that right now, when we pick a homeless person up, whether it's APD or RPD or the Sheriff's Department, we don't have a central location to bring them to. So this will start them, the county will operate it. It will be owned by the Good News Rescue Mission, and from there, we can get the services that are necessary for homeless. And so it's something new. We're the first county to do this in California, and between trying to build a new correctional facility and homelessness, those are going to be a couple of our top priorities. And again, the top priorities are set by the majority of board for the Shasta County Board of Supervisors, so it's not just my priorities, but it's what the board and what the community in general wants. And so the jail is not going to be easy. This will be probably the most expensive project that Shasta County has ever undertaken. So it's no easy task. Our current jail is really at its end of life. It is still functioning. They have maintained it, but we need more facilities to incarcerate more people, and it's going to affect everywhere. Every community within the county is affected by crime, and right now, lower level crimes are not being addressed, and we do need to address those. And so between the correctional facility and at home for the homeless, those are going to be my two priorities, top priorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Plummer.
So I'm going to talk about this in two different ways. Number one is kind of county-wide priorities, and then also I think that when it comes to a place like Lakehead and Mountain Gate and these other communities that are smaller, that you all have, top issues that might be different and overlapping with county-wide priorities. So countywide priorities are reduce homelessness, cut crime, and fix our roads. So if we start with homelessness, we had about 300 homeless in Shasta County in 2007. Now 15 years later or so, we have over 1,000. And so that's one of the biggest increases. Even if you look at San Francisco and LA, our increase in homelessness is on par with what we're seeing there. So we need to turn that around, and we need to reverse that. I think some of the things that the at-home group that Supervisor Jones mentioned are a good step in the right direction, but I'm concerned that it actually won't solve the problem. And I want to tell you a story about an organization that I worked with probably about 10 years ago now, which they were a affordable housing developer. And so they built homes that then people who are homeless would live in. Now, they did that for a number of years, and they realized, okay, we're not actually solving the problem. And so then they said, okay, what if we were to start a campaign, and we're going to do a 100,000 homes campaign, where we're going to work with communities across the nation, and we're going to try to build 100,000 homes or units for homeless people to live in. Well, a year and a half later, they achieved that. But they realized that in the communities where those homes were built, they had no less homeless. And so they changed it, and they oriented their initiative around called Built for Zero, where the goal was to get to zero homelessness. And they started by saying, what if we set a goal as a community to get to zero homelessness? And now, several years later, they've reached what they call functional zero in 14 communities around the country. And so how we approach it, we can't just add new services or add new options. We need to approach it by starting by saying, let's set the goal of getting to zero homelessness and then measure the data frequently. They have a name. In the communities they work with, they create a list of everyone's name who's homeless, and they have the organizations that are working on it review that list monthly so that they're actually troubleshooting and seeing how can we get each individual person. So that's number one. More we could say about that. Crime, when it comes to crime, I believe we also need a bigger jail, but before we build a bigger jail, we need to have a jail and a criminal justice system that is working. And right now, our jail is not really working for two reasons. One is that we have staffing issues. We had the current third floor of the jail closed for over a year. And now we've got it open barely, but it's fragile, and that could slip back into not being able to keep that open at any point. I mean, the sheriff had hired around 45 deputies or custody correctional officers and lost 48, I believe, something around that. So he lost more than he had hired. And that we need to address before we go building a new facility. And so I'd like to see us make investments in fixing the staffing issue. The other challenge that we have is that people go into our jail and then they come back out and they recommit crimes and have to go back into the jail. Now we arrest about 700 to 800 people a month. Our current jail holds 450 people. So there's no jail. We couldn't build a big enough jail to hold everyone we arrest. We need to figure out how to reduce the likelihood that those people are gonna recommit crimes. And so we need to be investing in that, or every 20 years, we're gonna have to keep building a bigger jail, and we're never going to be able to catch up with it. And so I wanna see us invest in that. One last thing to share on this is that if we look at our homelessness numbers from 2022 to 2023, we saw an increase of 200 people more who are homeless on the streets. What's interesting is that of that 200, about 100 of them have a felony conviction. Well, what happened? The jail, floor of the jail was closed during that year. I asked the sheriff, what happens when somebody's released from the jail? Well, we're just glad that they are getting out of there and that we have more space. We often release them in the middle of the night. So those people are just ending up back on the streets and more likely to commit crime. That is a broken system that isn't working, and so we need to fix that. We don't want to grow something that isn't working. Number 3 is fix our roads. Our roads rank, according to the last data I've seen, 7th worst in the state. On a scale of 0 to 100, we score an average of 50. And so we currently don't have enough money in the budget to be able to fix the roads that are basically failed or poor. And so I want to see us pursue grant dollars or find other revenue sources. There's a few ideas there we can talk about more to get those roads that are scoring 0 to 50 up to par. And there's actually 10 in this community that are scoring below 50. And then I'll just allude to that in your community, I know that there's going to be priorities that are different from those 3. And so what I would like to do is make sure that the smaller communities like your own are also getting their priorities met, even if they don't necessarily align with these bigger countywide properties. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to see if the audience has a question now. Anyone want to? We'll go back to these.
Segue off of both of your responses and your priorities. Lakehead does not have any official law enforcement. They haven't for more than 25 years. And we always get the reason is budget crisis. And I know there's a budget crisis, but I like some of the things I heard tonight about let's find out what happened to make that problem be solved. Our sheriff needs more deputies. He doesn't have enough income from the county coming in to pay the deputies the amount of money to keep the deputies. They go over to the Reading Police Department because they can make more money when they get out of the academy. Well, that's a problem, so we need to solve it, not just complain, sorry Lakehead, sorry Shingletown, you don't have a resident deputy, because I don't have enough deputies now. My question.
Okay, that is actually one of the specific questions. So I'll read the specific question and give both candidates the opportunity to answer that. It was as follows. For over a decade, the Sheriff's Department has promised to provide a resident deputy for Lakehead. Why has this not occurred, and what can you do about it? We'll start with Supervisor Johnson.
Yeah, so I asked that when I first got elected, I did ask Sheriff Johnson, and he came in. It was Eric Greeny that I asked first, and then Sheriff Johnson shortly thereafter. And they're always saying that they don't have the staffing to be able to do it. It is not a budget issue. So he has the money in the budget to be able to do this, so he has to make that decision. Now, the sheriff is an elected official, and there's only so much we can do, but from pressure from the public, down at the board meeting, because the sheriff usually attends our meeting, that is how things get done. When the one level of the jail was shut down, the sheriff did not inform the Shasta County Board of Supervisors that he was shutting that down. He didn't come to us 6 months in advance and say, hey, I need X, Y, or Z. He gave us no warning, and 100 inmates were let out on the street. That was the decision that the sheriff made. That was not the decision that I would have done. The issue in the jail was not about money. We had correctional officers that were there for 10 to 15 years and left to take other jobs that paid less. The problem was they were working them too much overtime. The jail was ran in 12-hour shifts, so you do a 12-hour shift, and you do 3 days, and you get 4 days off, and then you do 4 days, and you get 3 days off. And that works, and that has worked for a long time in a lot of counties across this country. But when you overwork them, they leave. Sheriff Johnson needed to do a more aggressive recruiting campaign to get more people so that he didn't overwork. Plus, we have 60 other sworn officers throughout county government that could have backfilled that to solve that problem without closing the floor of the jail. The floor of the jail was closed once before under Sheriff Bazinko for the same lack of knowledge of how to staff it correctly. Right now, the recruiting has picked up, and it's completely full. And, you know, going forward in the future, I do believe that not only Lakehead, but Happy Valley and a few of the other areas are going to get a full-time resident deputy. When I brought this up at the board level, right off the bat, others in Shingletown and rightfully so in Happy Valley have similar problems that you have here in Lakehead. And so it's not just one single deputy, because it wouldn't be fair. We really need to address all the small outlying areas that each have similar crime problems, and they do need a resident deputy. Bernie, for example, has several resident deputies. That's what we need here, and it's just a matter of getting that budget and getting the recruiting there. And that comes from a skilled sheriff. And I believe Sheriff Johnson can do this job well. He's learning quickly. He doesn't have a sheriff deputy background. It's more of a police department background. And so we have 2,300 employees, and our general fund is mostly eaten up by public safety, that's police and fire. And so a vast majority of our discretionary funds goes to the sheriff, and we have rarely disagreed. In addition to that, we've given all of our county employees for the last 22 years a 2.5% pay raise for 22 straight years. So we've tried to be pretty fair across the board for everybody, but that comes with great expense, and there are limits as to what we can do. But I believe Happy Valley, Shingletown, and Lakehead all need a resident deputy, and I will continue to push the sheriff to do that, but I'm gonna need your help as well. And we have those board meetings. We're gonna have more board meetings this year than we've ever had before, and the people that come and speak to those types of issues is how they'll get solved, because it's pressure applied to the sheriff, not the board. The board is ready to do it.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, would you like to repeat the question?
Sorry. Yeah, a few different things to comment on here. First, I think it is the responsibility of the board to develop a relationship with the sheriff where that information is being shared and we're staying on top of it. And I would make it my duty to do that so that I know in advance that that's coming. And if that's not happening, then that feels like a major breach in the relationship. So, don't know what caused it. The other thing is that if you look at our budget in terms of approved deputies, we went from 52 4 years ago to now 48. So we've actually reduced the number of deputies approved in the budget. So I'm not going to stand here and promise to you that there's going to be a resident deputy. I mean, I think you've heard that a lot and it hasn't come true. And so I'm not going to do that. What I am going to do is encourage you all to participate, and in two different ways. One, there's a citizens patrol, volunteer citizens patrol group in the city of Shasta Lake. I know a few of you are here, in Happy Valley, in Bernie, and in Shingletown as well. And so you all could start one here, and this is something that the sheriff could, for example, donate one of their old vehicles, kind of help get that up and going. But that's something that you all can take into your hands in the next year without having to wait for certain things to happen at the county level. The other thing that I want to look into is right now with the Bernie substation, we have 13 full-time employees in the sheriff's office. Bernie has about 3,700 people who live there. In the city of Shasta Lake, we have 16 for 10,700 people. So I know that's a lot of numbers, but basically we have a lot more people working at the Bernie substation per person in that community than we do in the city of Shasta Lake. And so I'm curious, why are there so many staff in the sheriff's office at the Bernie substation, and is it something where we could reallocate some of those officers? So I would encourage you all to get involved in see if this is something as a community. I know you have done this before. You have risen up to provide for your needs on the fire fund, and the county could help you on that. I know that's something that the sheriff's office could easily do, and that could be something that really moves the ball forward in stopping some of this petty crime that you're having, and basically reversing that culture that's happening.
Thank you. The next general question for both candidates reads as follows. What will you do to improve civility at public meetings? I'm assuming you're talking about board meetings.
We've had a pretty exciting year last year in 2023, and you can go back and actually look at each and every one of our meetings. We record those on the county's website. You can take a look at every one. And I've tried hard to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to come to the board and speak and give their 3 minutes. It's important. It's your right, your First Amendment right, to speak freely, uninterrupted at a board meeting. Unfortunately, we've had 3 or 4 individuals that have taken advantage of that routinely, and they've made it their life's mission, if you will, to try to disrupt not only the Shasta County Board of Supervisors meetings, but city council meetings as well. Penal Code Section 403 says if you purposely disrupt a public meeting, you shall be removed from that meeting. And once again, it's up to our sheriff deputies. They make the call on that. I have had several meetings with the sheriff trying to enforce Penal Code Section 403 a little bit more for a few people that want to disrupt speakers. So what's been happening on several meetings is that when a speaker comes up to speak for 3 minutes, and I listen to every speaker, that comes up. I don't turn my cell phone on or do other things. I want to hear from the public, and it's important that you're heard, and that we can act upon what we've heard from the public. But we've had members of the public then try to disrupt those speakers and interrupt them time and time again. And so it's imperative that we use every technique possible. What I could have done is moved public meeting at the back of the meeting, and I have the authority to do that. But that wouldn't be right for the public, because we want to hear from the public, and I think public comment needs to be at the beginning. When I was at City Council, I objected to the Reading City Council moving the public comment to the back, because we're not listening. Most people won't stay for that length of meeting, and so we lost valuable public input that was no longer there. So I'm hopeful in the future, this year, under the leadership of Chair Pride, that if we do have anyone that is disrupting a speaker, because they're not disrupting the board, that they are removed, and then order can be restored. And so there's only so much that the chair can do. Law enforcement occasionally will need to be involved in these matters. Last year, as chair, we only had 25 meetings a year. I added up to 42 meetings, and this year we're up to probably about 47, so that's almost every week we will be having a meeting. And that gives us an opportunity to have more public comment and listen to every single person. So we're giving the public an opportunity to speak. Unfortunately, under the laws of California, there is protected speech. And so people come up and they do use foul, loud, rude, and vulgar language. And unfortunately, it is all protected under the First Amendment. So we have to have pretty thick skin as elected officials. I'm still going to listen to you, even if you're loud or rude, but I probably won't pay, I won't give it the weight when someone is civil and has legitimate concerns. We got a lot of work done this year, and in some meetings it may have set us back, 20 or 30 minutes, but we got a lot of work done for the public, and we're going to continue to do that in 2024.
Ultimately, I believe that the culture is set by the leadership. And one of the number one comments I've heard as I've walked around knocking on doors is that they want to see the board work together as a team, and they're discouraged by the way that the board as a whole has treated each other. And when the board is modeling that type of behavior, it encourages the people who come to those meetings to engage in similarly destructive behavior. And so number one is how I would shift it is how I would change the way that I would interact with other board members. My goal as a board member would not be to make other board members look bad, not be to call them names, and that is what is currently been happening. Second is how the board treats those who come up to public comment. And you're often hearing the board react to people who are speaking in public comment in ways that they may be deserved, but are demeaning or insulting. And that also creates that same behavior out of the people who are coming up in public comment. And so you won't see that from me, regardless of whether or not I like what they're saying. I think everyone deserves their 3 minutes, and then, without commentary from the board. And then the next thing is a policy-related decision. Supervisor Garman brought forth during last year the idea that when somebody had their 3 minutes, they would be cut off and no longer able to continue. Because one of the challenges, and I can sympathize with Supervisor Jones when he was chair, is that if you let some people go beyond 3 minutes, then everybody's going to develop a perception that you're treating certain people unfairly. And no one really knows how, unless they're standing there with a stopwatch, who's getting more time and whose side they are. So it makes sense to me, and I would have voted in favor of Supervisor Garman's motion to have their microphone cut off at 3 minutes, which is their allotted time. Unfortunately, the board majority, including Supervisor Jones, did not vote in favor of that. However, Supervisor Cry, now that he's chair, has imposed that. And so we're seeing that that's something that likely works, and that could have been done last year, but was chosen not to do. So again, culture starts from the top, and how we as leaders model that to the rest of the community.
Okay, do we have any other questions from the audience at this point, before I move on? Yes.
Hi, I have a question. I guess first of all, it's about the jail and the new jail system. Number one, Sheriff Johnson came to our community and laid out to us an absolutely beautiful plan that I was very impressed with the potential of growth and meeting so many needs of so many people. And the building would be built on county-owned property. It would be out on the east side of town. And I was very disappointed when I saw that the Board of Supervisors did not consider that plan. The amount of space that you have to build jail systems up by the courthouse is extremely limited, and our community is going to grow. It's going to grow more, and we're going to be right up against the same problem, is not having space. Where the space that was suggested on the east side of town has so much potential growth. I also find that now that you're taking some of the services out by the mission, the same problem's there. You have a limited amount of space to meet those needs. Yes, temporarily, but I would hope, or I would like to know what it was of Sheriff Johnson's plan that you objected to, Mr. Jones.
Yeah, so I've been working on this for quite a few years. Sheriff Johnson came forward with a plan called the Wagon Wheel. I'm sure most of you saw it. The Wagon Wheel is about a 300-year-old design, and most of them have all been torn down well over 100 years ago. They are the worst designs that you could possibly have today. Now, the good news is we have a great architect firm right now, and I was able to secure them, and they are working with Shasta County, and they've built 50 different correctional facilities, and they're very efficient on how they build these things. I'm not opposed to building a new correctional facility off-site. The problem is the price tag to that was $500 million, and we do not have $500 million. We cannot finance $500 million. We've already tried going to the public and asking for more money in the form of sales tax or some sort of particular tax. That's the only way that's going to work, is to tax you more. And I don't think right now that would fly. And so it was $500 million. So that's not something that's within our grasp. That's totally out of the question. It's not that I don't want to do it, but I don't have $500 million. Right now, we have almost $900 million, almost $1 billion in pension and health care debt. And you have to pay for that. And it's costing us $30 million a year for the next 40 years just to do that alone, and it comes out of the general fund. Right now, what we can do is maybe build a $125 million facility. And it'll take about $10 to $15 million annually to fund it for the staffing. This is a tall order. We put every department head on notice now that changes to the budget will most likely be coming this year for the next straight 4 years to try to accomplish this project. This is within our grasp, but it will not be easy, and it will not come without heavy impact on the general fund. But $500 million is out of the question. So I was to be honest, I was disappointed with the sheriff because he didn't come to the board. We control the budget. That's our job. He runs the jail, he runs the sheriff's department. He's very capable. He's very capable, smart guy. Let's work with the board. Look what we have. I had several meetings with him, the command staff, public works, CEO, and it just simply was out of the question to start talking about something that we can't do. And this is kind of what happened the last couple of times. They started talking about things that we couldn't do, and so it didn't get done. The jail should have been done 10 years ago. It would have been a lot cheaper. So we're trying to tackle something that is within our grasp, and it's still very expensive. And I'm not opposed to something off-site. The site that he selected was a former dump, and you can't build on that. So nothing about his proposal made a lot of sense. You know, and I grew up in this town, and I grew up in this county, and you know, this is not an area where we can go to the public and say, hey, we're gonna tax you more. It won't pass. Dedicated taxes have to pass on a high threshold, and we've tried that before, they failed. I believe within our budget that we can do this, and it will just take some sacrifices, but I believe if you ask most people, the number one priority is crime. And so that's why we're moving forward. Now, if we demolish, and very soon here shortly, next month, the current Shasta County courthouse, they're gonna be vacating that, and they're gonna be going across the street. It'll be a bigger, better facility, brand new, of course, $175 million. And the old courthouse will belong to Shasta County. That could be demolished, part of it could be demolished, and a new jail could be built there, a new one that's much more efficient. And in fact, we own 2 square blocks in that area. So there's actually a little bit more land there when you start taking a look at what's there. We already own the land, the infrastructure is in, and building there is far cheaper than anywhere else in the county. And that's why the majority of the board, past board, and this board agrees that if we're going to do something within our grasp, it will be at that location.
However, if you have anything you'd like to add to that discussion?
Some feedback. Oh, there you go. So I agree that with Supervisor Jones for the most part on this, in the sense that in terms of feasibility, it's certainly more feasible to build there. What I would like to see is the board push back a little bit on the $500 million estimate, and that's because if you look at the 4 new jails that have been built since 2019, they cost about $250,000 per bed. And if we had a 700 bed jail, which is what the existing jail plus the new jail would get us, that would cost us around, if I'm doing my math correctly, $250 million, not $500 million. So, you know, I'm not saying that that $500 million was off. I just say, let's look at that again, because 4 other communities between 2019 and today have built jails for much cheaper than, including one that was what they call modular, which is in Santa Barbara, which is similar to what Sheriff Johnson proposed. Now again, if it's $500 million, then yeah, unfortunately, I don't think we're gonna be able to do that. But the other thing that we need to consider in this whole equation is that the existing building is not going to last forever. As Supervisor Jones said, it's on its last legs. We're spending about $5 to $10 million a year on updates and maintenance just to keep it functioning. And so that eventually is going to have to be demolished, and we might need to rebuild a new jail on that facility as well. And so is that gonna cost us another 125, or if we do it in 10 years, is it gonna be 200 million? And so the idea here is that we need to account for that cost, because as we're thinking, we can't, yes, we have some urgency around wanting to cut crime, but we can't put ourselves in a worse position in 10 years from now. So again, building the jail where it might be the right decision, but I'd like us to pressure test those numbers, and I'd like us to also make sure we're factoring in the cost of redoing and rebuilding the existing jail building. And the final thing I'll say, I'll come back to my first point around crime, is that we need to make sure that we have a criminal justice system that works, that reduces the likelihood of crime. And so if we build a jail building that doesn't allow for sufficient programming space, which it may in the location that's being proposed, then are we actually solving the problem, or are we just doing something that gives us the appearance of solving the problem? And so I would want to make sure that our system is set up so that it reduces the likelihood of crime.
Okay. The next question for both candidates is, how will you be available to and communicate with the Lakehead community?
So I haven't gone on vacation since 1960. 1978, so I'm usually pretty available. I come up here for CSA 2 for the Sugarloaf meetings. I come up to CSA 3 to Castella, and throughout the district here in District 4. So I'm easy to get a hold of. I've worked in the same building since 1978, so that's 46 years. I'm at the same spot, 1600 East Cypress. My phone number is 222-3223, and people do come and see me. I would say 5, 6 to 10 people see me on different issues every day of the week, and I'm there 6 days a week. I use that as my office because the downtown site is cut off to the public. And so actually today, most of the Board of Supervisors don't use our downtown office because they're just not accessible. They weren't designed that way. And so I like to be out in the community and listening to the public, and I'm easy to get a hold of, and I always have been. Because our job really is to represent the people of our district. That's what we do, is listen to you and see what we can do to make your lives better. And that's, to me, that's a very important thing. And I know for Lakehead, going down to our meetings is difficult, but that's the time where we also listen, is at those board meetings, to your concerns. And when I served, I'll tell you a small story. I served on the Reading City Council, and they wanted to do a soccer field, and it was $10 million, and the city really didn't have $10 million. But they came in waves, and small kids to big kids, and they really wanted a new soccer field, and they pressured the council, and the council took out a loan, and they built a $10 million soccer field. From that pressure. It wasn't a wise financial decision because you have to pay interest on that, so you end up paying about $20 million. But that type of pressure did affect the local officials at the Reading City Council. And that's kind of what we need from the outlying areas. And we do get a little bit of that from people from Round Mountain and Bernie and so forth like that. Now, the other reason why you see extra staffing in the Bernie substation is because the distance from Reading to there, and they have to go all the way up to Fall River, it's a long haul, and so they're very isolated. So if they got a call, people from Reading would not be able to make it there, sheriff's deputies would not be able to make it there in a timely manner. But those people did come to the board and put pressure on the board, and what do you know? They have resident deputies. And so that's kind of what we need from the community here, because I do believe it's a constant issue. I know you have a liaison assigned, but you really need a resident deputy, and the pressure applied will really help. And it's really up to the sheriff. It'll help the sheriff make that decision.
Yeah, I believe that government should be accessible to the people, and that in a sense, we're paying our tax dollars to the government with the expectation that we receive a benefit and a service from that. And so if you think of how a company works, it actually seeks out its customers and goes to them and says, how are you liking this product? How are you liking the service? What else would you like? And so I see the role of government and elected officials in particular as going to the people. And that's why I've not done several thousand doors in the Shasta County since August, because I see it as going to the people. And I ask people 2 questions whenever I knock on the door. What would you like to see the Shasta County focus on, and how could Shasta County better serve you? And I feel like, and I've committed to do that after, if I get elected, that I would do that afterwards, because I believe that it's important to go to the people where they are, not require them to come somewhere. Sure, that'd be great if you want to come to the board meetings. We'd love for you to be there, but I believe government should be going out to the people. The other thing that I do is I send out a weekly email sharing my, what I'm learning, what I am understanding. There's several thousand people on the email list, and I invite their thoughts on each time. And so that's something that will continue to do as well, is bring you along on the learning journey that I'm on, and here's what I'm experiencing. Also, if there's a contentious issue that is going to be before the board, particularly if there's one that is facing this community, then I would hold a town hall on that and invite your opinions, and also bring in people who have opposing viewpoints and allow you to hear both sides of the story on that, so that you can have your perspectives heard there. And yes, I believe that it's great, again, for you to apply pressure to the board, but I believe as your elected official that it's my job to represent your interests and apply the pressure if that's what you feel and that's what you've told me. Government is notorious for being unresponsive. You call someone and they're like, direct you to someone else, or you never get a call back, or you send an email and you're like, what happened to this? I never heard. And so I've committed to respond to all emails, calls, and texts within 48 hours. I don't know if I'll be 100% perfect, probably not. But I want to be responsive to you all, so that if you have something that you're going to hear back and then I'm going to get that. I mean, I met with a group here, I forget what month that was, maybe September, and they were asking a lot of questions about TOT tax and where that money goes and how that's controlled, and said that they've been asking for this for, I don't know if years is correct, maybe months, I don't know how long it was, but I went and found that out and reported it back to you, and that's what I'll do as supervisor, is I will get back to you and make sure that you hear from me in a timely manner.
Okay, I'll take another question from the audience, if you have one, back in the back. By the way, we have Harold Jones and Scott Skipper representing the business community here in Lakehead.
Thank you very much. It's actually sort of a two-part question. For this little community, between sales tax, property taxes, and TOT taxes, since 2008, we have given the county millions and millions of dollars. And I would like to get your response and what we're getting in return for our investment here in town. Secondly, the information over there for Officer Zentner, we have been given by Sheriff Johnson, and I really have a hard time with this. He's given us 3 hours a week as a sheriff to come up here to Lakehead. That's almost a waste of the drive up here. Would it be possible to possibly talk to the store over here or one of the places and get a little substation where the sheriff can be up here more often and actually do something with his time? Thank you.
Yeah, so I think, there's going to be no disagreement that we need a resident deputy for sure. There's no question about that. Your TOT taxes last year for District 4 was roughly around $550,000 for the entire District 4. This year was a little bit better. We don't have the returns in for the fourth quarter yet, but given the last couple years, it's probably up about $100,000, about $650,000 in TOT tax. But again, that's where they don't break it down for Lakehead and the different communities, and so that's part of the city of Reading, Shasta Lake City. But I do believe that a reasonable share of that would be created from here in the Lakehead area and in and around the marinas and the lake. But to give you an idea, just for District 4, if we took that $650,000 and attempted to build a jail with $650,000, it would take 200 years to pay for the current jail that we're working on right now. And that's just to incarcerate people, and that's not fire, and that's not roads, and that's not all the other things that we do. So the problems that we're facing here are not that much different in elsewhere in the county, where you have small counties and relative small amounts of money, that we still need services in these areas. And again, the resident deputy, I'm all in favor of that. I believe it's warranted, and I believe it's deserved here to be able to do that. But when you look at all the things the county does and that we're responsible for, we end up spending a lot of money on a whole variety of different things. And you can see just from the jail alone how expensive that project is, and the admin building, and the maintenance on that, and all the other county services that we have. And so, but there is, I believe there is hope for a resident deputy. I don't think we give up on that. Things that are tough, you fight for. And as your supervisor, I'll fight. For example, here in Lakehead, in CSA 2, you had a water line that had a 90% leak. And that was a $3 million fix. It had been going on for years, at least since 2015. And I pressured the public works director very hard, and even threatened to use general fund monies, and in a very short time, that grant was found, and that pipe is now being replaced as we speak. So pressure applied does work. It is effective. I wish we didn't have to do it that way, but it is the world that we live in. And I think Lakehead deserves a resident deputy. I think would help here a lot. And again, as we have a new correctional facility and the places to put them, it makes sense. Because right now, half the time we're not arresting people because we have no place to put them. And we are having a lot more programming, and so we're going to have a lot more improvements. And in fact, we're working right now, and I'll probably make the announcement next month, that one of the things that we've done on the at-home committees, and one of the issues was when a person gets right out of jail, they're just simply being released, and it'll be a short time, they'll be back in jail for the same thing that we arrested them for. And so I'm working on a new resource center for Shasta County, where we take those people exiting jail and we get them into immediate programs. All county funded, and I'm trying to use Health and Human Services there because they have more money than most of our other departments. Most of the budget for Shasta County, more than half of the budget is with Health and Human Services. And that then can start helping free up space and be able to arrest people. I'd like to be able to arrest people for low-level crimes, as they should be. Because that's what we're seeing a lot throughout the county and a lot in District 4. So we're working on it. It's not an easy deal, but I do believe that we have a majority of the board. And I really believe in this board today, starting last year in January with the election, successful election of Supervisor Kelson and Supervisor Pride. Those guys have been hard workers behind the scenes. They're learning a lot. It was their first year in office last year, and they did not take it lightly. They've been working hard behind the scenes. I'm really impressed with the majority of the board, and we're going to keep pushing forward, trying to solve problems. And each of us, obviously, we fight for our district. Kellstrom fights for South County, and Supervisor Pride for District 1, and I'll fight for you guys here and keep putting pressure on the sheriff to get a resident deputy.
Could I ask a quick follow-up question on that? You just mentioned about the Sugarloaf water system that was done, and you mentioned that there was a grant.
Yes.
So how much money actually came out of Shasta County's budget?
Nothing. I was prepared to take $3 million out of the general fund to do it, but small water projects, so that was grant funded, so we're lucky in that regard. And if that grant had not come through, I would have used general fund money.
But what are you doing for Lakehead? I haven't heard anything other than the jail. What are you doing for Lakehead? We don't have the police, we don't have fire, we don't have a school, we don't have a park. What are you doing for Lakehead?
Right, well, you're not gonna get police, but you can get a resident sheriff deputy, so that is something.
Other than the jail, what are you doing for Lakehead?
Well, I'm working and putting pressure on the sheriff for a resident sheriff deputy. That's what I'm doing for Lakehead. We've already done some work with the fire department here, and that's had some success. And water, those are big issues, but right now, I'm working hard to get a resident deputy, and that's not an easy task.
So does the county do anything for Lakehead?
Sure, we maintain, just like that water system, we maintain roads. There are lots of charges that are being out there. So there is things that we're doing. Well, again, so for Lakehead, keep in mind that you're one part of the county. The county has to function as a whole. So most of the money that you see in the budget is going to be spent down in the lower areas. Building a jail is not going to make sense to build it in Lakehead, right? And so that kind of a money is still going to benefit Lakehead. The admin center is still benefiting Lakehead. The ROV is still benefiting Lakehead and all the other communities that we have. You have to look at it that way. And realistically, again, the pressure applied from the public is what is ultimately going to see greater improvement. And to be honest, I've never seen you in a board meeting, and we need your help. Because that's how it works. That is how it works. I wish it was different.
I'd like to give Mr. Plummer the opportunity to answer the original question regarding Transient Occupancy Tax. Then we'll get back to yours.
I think the frustration that I'm hearing is coming from something that I think people feel all across the country, which is that we're paying more and more to the government in our taxes, and we feel like we're getting less and less in return. And I think when you look at the Shasta County budget, in 2019 and 2020, we spent $500 million. Now, the last budget, it was $660 million. So our budget increased by $60 million in about 4 years. There is a lot of money out there, right? But we're not getting the results that we want. We don't feel like our roads are where they are. We don't feel like crime is where it is. And so that is what we need to be reviewing. There's talk of reviewing the finances and how the finances are spent. But it's not enough to look at how money is being spent. It's what are we getting for the money? And right now we're not getting what we want for the money that is being spent. The money keeps increasing, right? And so in 5 years, we might come back and we're spending another $200 million more, but we're not getting the results. And so that is my focus as supervisor, is how do you get the results for the money that we're spending? And if we're spending, $10 million on something and we're spending it wisely, but we're not getting the results, then that's not money well spent in my mind. And so when it comes to reviewing our finances, that's what I want to look at, is what are the outcomes? What are we getting for that money that we're spending? When it comes to the resident deputy, yeah, this is, again, any one of us could come up here and promise to you that you're going to have a resident deputy, and they might in 4 years, as you've seen many times, come back in 4 years and that not happen, and then you say, oh, you promised that to. So I'm not going to do that. I mean, it would be easy to do that. What I am going to do is figure out how do we get, things like equality between Bernie and Shasta Lake, and why are there so much difference in terms of the number of law enforcement officers per population, and see if there's a way to shift some of that up here. For example, I'm going to encourage you and see if I can work with you on things like citizen patrol group. I'm going to see if we can recruit someone from this community to join and be part of the sheriff's staff. Because what we've seen in other communities is that when that happens, the sheriff is often able to allocate hours when they're off to have them in their community working there. And so there are creative ways that we can start to make progress on it, that you all can be part of as well, and that we can start to chip away at that. And I think we can see crime go down, which is the ultimate goal, right? We want to see crime go down in this community. Resident deputy seems to be the way to do that, but there might be other ways. And so I want to encourage us to be creative with the levers at our disposal to drive crime down in this community and make sure we're getting outcomes for it.
Yeah, Steve, maybe you have a specific question.
Well, I feel a little bit confused. I feel like we're really dumping on the sheriff tonight. And I've talked to the sheriff, and I know several other people here have too. It's not the sheriff that can't get the deputies, it's the money. And he's told us, you need to go and ask. People will come. I know a couple of families who had their sons come over, work in sheriff's departments in other areas, wanted to work for the county, but, they didn't offer enough, so they went to RPD. This has happened a lot. So I really think, I wish the sheriff was here tonight, I feel kind of like what Matt talked about, being respectful. I feel like we've been a little bit disrespectful to the sheriff tonight.
Well, I respect the sheriff, and I respect the job that he does. And again, I have a degree in administrative justice, and I'm post-certified, so it's not something that I take lightly. It is a tough and difficult job. The sheriff has the budget. So, you can say various things, but we have collectively as a board, we have given him a budget that allows him to staff not only his deputies, and just 2 years ago or 3 years ago, we gave the largest raise in Shasta County's history to the sheriff's department. And what did the city of Reading do? They went above that so that they could continue to steal ours. And so they have made it an effort that no matter what raise we give, they'll go higher and continue to steal. Now the good news is they're fully staffed, so there's going to be no stealing going on for a little while. But the sheriff does have the budget. And so it was a question of recruiting. And this board all agrees that the sheriff is very capable of being able to not only handle all the issues that are within a department, because we've come from an area where we saw Eric McGreeny get votes of no confidence. You saw that, 2 votes of no confidence, and ultimately he had to leave the sheriff's department. So he came into a tough, difficult situation, and his command staff is doing a great job, and they're solving the problems. But it wasn't a budget issue. He had the money for it. The bottom line in the jail was everybody in the jail works overtime every day. They work a 12-hour shift. And they're okay with that as long as you stick to the 4 and 3 week work. You can't work. We had guys in there working 5 and 6 days a week, and they're gonna quit. And they did. And so we weren't staffing it correctly. It had been left to not function correctly, and too many people were leaving. It was unnecessary. And I'm here to tell you that when there is a mistake made, because what happened there was 100 inmates were let loose in Shasta County, and that affected everybody, and there was a crime committed because of that, and it didn't need to happen. It was a solvable problem by getting staffing. We could have taken people from the DA over to fill that, over from probation to fill that. We had over 60 post-certified people to fill it, and it only needed 10 people, and we have 2,300 employees. It was very doable. Why he shut the floor down without consulting the board is a mystery, right? I mean, he could have easily come to us 6 months in advance and said, hey, I'm struggling. I'd like some help. What can we do? And we'd all pitched in and got it done. But that didn't happen. So you gotta call sometimes when there's a problem. You gotta tell the truth and say, and let the chips fall where they're at. Thank you.
I think we're being led to believe something that isn't quite how the story happened. First, I don't think this is an easy problem to solve because one, we're seeing this all around the state, staffing shortages, and the nation for law enforcement. So it's a bigger problem, and we need to think creatively about how we're gonna solve this, not just for now, but for the long term. Second is that while the sheriff did not apparently let the board know that he was closing the jail was then, the floor of the jail, was then still closed for over a year, when if this had been an easy problem to solve and the board had thought it was so easy, they could have solved it during that year, but it remained closed for over a year once the board knew about it. And so it's not an easy problem to solve. When I took a tour of the jail, I was told they had a custody correctional officer who had just left to go back and work at Walmart because he could work fewer hours, not have to work overtime, make more, and get money in the 401k. And so it's a complex challenge, and we need to be creative about how we're incentivizing our young people to get involved in these careers at a young age, how we're thinking about structure and compensation so that, the other thing is it's not necessarily a recruiting problem. You know, the sheriff hired 45 people and lost 48 or somewhere close to those numbers. And so he was bringing people in, and I asked him, how long are these people staying who are leaving? And most of them are leaving within a year. And so something's happening where they think they want to participate and be part of it, and then they get there and they find out, this is not working. And so it is not just a money problem, but it's also partially a money problem. And the board controls the budget and approves the budget for each of the departments. And so the board is responsible for setting that. And what we've seen in this budget is that from 2020 to now, 52 deputies were approved. This is not in correctional officers, but 52 were approved in 2020, and now we have 48, so we dropped by 4. And so we need to be creative in how we're solving this staffing issue in law enforcement, which is happening all around the nation for the long term so that we can get ahead of it and not be in a bad position, even worse position coming down the road.
Okay, the next question is, Lakehead resort owners undergo routine inspections and pay county fees for operating, yet private owners of short-term rentals do not undergo such scrutiny. How can this playing field be made more equal?
Yeah, so I think you're gonna see this year, the first thing we did in the first meeting of this year is we terminated all impact fees, and that's just the first step, because there's excess regulations as well. And so these fees are onerous, and we're going to continue to take a look at other fees other than just impact fees and try to reduce those as well. When I was on city council, I reduced impact fees, and the majority of the council reduced impact fees by a third. And we had 200 permits pulled where we had nothing for several months. And so obviously the costs are harming growth, and they should be more on a playing field, and also extra regulation. We have a lot of excess regulation, and systematically we're going to be not just taking one issue at a time, but probably blocks of issues, because otherwise if we take one issue, it's just not simply enough time in the year to solve each and every regulation that's unnecessary. If you go build a home, for example, in Montana, you're going to see a very different scenario than what you're going to see in Shasta County. And you're going to have a lot more inspections and regulations, and those buildings are not any unsafe than what we're doing here today. So we're going to be going over the Shasta County Unified Building Code and trying to cut as much regulations so that it is fair, so that people do grow their businesses, and that's important. And when growth occurs, and this is a small county, it's good for everybody, and the trickle-down effect throughout the entire county is superb. And we saw that if anyone, my opponent here didn't live here in 2001 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and saw the growth that occurred and how good it was for Shasta County and all 3 cities. It was tremendous. We want to get back to that. We want to get people to invest. And that's why we terminated the impact fees, because while we're gonna lose that source of income, we're gonna make it up on sales tax and property tax, increased property tax values, which will go on forever. So it'll actually be superior for the county and better for the homeowner, that they don't have these big expensive fees up front. So this year, I think you're going to see one of our other main priorities besides the jail, correctional facility, and crime is going to be reduction of fees and reduction of excess regulation.
Yeah.
I'm also a fan of reducing regulation, though I'm not sure that impact fees and cutting impact fees will help Lakehead with the short-term rental challenge that was being posed in the question. In part because if you look at land in this area, there isn't a lot of room for development. I mean, a lot of it is owned by either the state or federal government. And so there isn't much room for development, which is part of another question that maybe we'll get to. So when it comes to addressing short-term rentals, I think we should consider two things. One is that the board actually has an ordinance regarding short-term rentals that has a lot to say about how many occupants can be there, when quiet hours are, noise levels, parking, trailers, all those things that I've heard you all complain about as being part of the problem of short-term rentals. My guess is that that code is not actually being enforced. And so what we're seeing other communities around the state do is they're enforcing their ordinances around short-term rentals to make sure that they're actually abiding by the rules that are already on the books, so that short-term rentals are having a net positive. I mean, you want people coming here. This is a destination town, but you don't want them disrupting the community. And so we need to make sure that they're actually following the ordinances on the book. The other thing that I think we should look at is, Lakehead, and this is how I started, was the idea that Lakehead is an amazing community because you know each other, you have each other's backs, and you're able to come to an event like this and talk to people that you know. Well, if there's too many short-term rentals, then that erodes the sense of community, and I've heard some concern about that. And so I think we should look at whether there should be a limit to the number of short-term rentals or a limit to the number of rentals, so that this maintains a community where you all can know each other, where you can go out and say hi to your neighbor, and not something where people all around the state or in the country are owning it but not living here. So I would like to see us, in terms of addressing the short-term rental issue, enforce the ordinances on the book and look at, I'm not saying it's necessarily the right action, but we should at least explore whether there should be a cap on short-term rentals.
Thank you. Okay, along that same vein, the other question with respect to enforcement was, Lakehead has a problem with loose, uncontrolled, and vicious dogs. How can we get more animal control in our area?
Yeah, so that is a function of the Shasta County Sheriff's Department. We do have an animal control, and so it's just a matter of, that's the first time that it's come to my attention that it's a serious issue. But again, get a hold of the Shasta County Sheriff's Department, and animal control can come up here. We have several vans, and we do a variety of different work throughout the county, and that is a function of Shasta County. And if we need more up here, let us know. Let's see if we can expand it a little bit, but it does have a cost to it, as everything does. And again, you're talking about your TOT taxes and all these other things. Well, animal control is a part of it, and if they're not coming up here, let me know. Let me know, and we'll fix it. Thank you.
So the interesting thing about this question is that it connects to impact fees in the sense that the county creates a fund for impact fees, and there is one for animal control that actually has $233,000 in it. And looking back over the last 5 to 10 years, that money has never been spent. So every year we add about $10,000 to $15,000 to it. And so what I would like to see is you reach out, there's 4 animal regulation officers, reach out to them, have them come up here. I don't know how to solve a dog problem, so I'm not gonna try to, throw out ideas on how to do that, but bring them up here, come up with a plan, and then if it requires some funds, we have funds set aside that can only be used for animal control. We have $233,000. Now, I'm not saying that you can have all of that, but come up with a plan, and we have some money set aside that could potentially be used to address this problem. So that would be my encouragement on this front.
Okay. Other questions from the audience?
I would like to know how much it costs Shasta County when we voted to get rid of the voting machines.
So it didn't cost you anything, we saved money in that. So unfortunately, it's been reported quite opposite in the newspaper. Well, I do know that it's true. So here's the facts. So here's probably what you didn't hear in the Record Searchlight, or News Cafe, or various other sources. So the Dominion voting machine contract was a lease, and it was about a 9-year lease for $2.2 million, but there was other costs involved as well. And so as I terminated, and as the majority of the board terminated the Dominion voting machine contract, we purchased for $950,000 roughly, the Hart Civic system, and that we own indefinitely. And so when you actually do the math, we're gonna save about $200,000 per year. Now the cost that you heard was the ROV Allen saying that we would need so many employees, which never were hired, that would cost $1.5 million annually. Those were never hired. That never occurred. So the reality today is you're paying less. And to be a little more blunt, ROV Allen was going to recommend to the board in 2 years from now to do just what we did, to buy Hart. The Dominion software and programs are very old and outdated, and they're vulnerable. They're very vulnerable. And I hope we talk more about election stuff because it's a serious issue here in Shasta County. But you didn't spend more, you're spending less, and that I guarantee. Thank you.
So Supervisor Jones is right that the cost of the machines is less. However, it doesn't account for the staff time that was spent from January of last year leading through the November election or around the fall, working on developing a new election system, interacting with various, there was a whole event where you could come and see how that was put on. And so that cost is certainly, and I don't know what that cost number would be. And also, suggesting that the cost that didn't materialize, which was this extra 1.5 million, which was approved in the budget for hand counting, that was intended to be there, and if Supervisor Jones had had his way, that would have been there. And so I think let's just be fair about what costs we're saying here and account for those two in this as part of the original plan for how this was going to happen.
So that was one of the questions that was submitted in advance. It was, what is your position on the use of voting machines in the county? I got the impression, Supervisor Jones, that you wanted to elaborate on that, and then I'll give Matt the opportunity to do that as well.
So I had many discussions and private meetings with the ROV for many months leading up to January, where we terminated the contract with Dominion. The question that I had for the ROV was how are we going to establish trust with the voters, with the system that we have? And we had specific issues where people found what appeared to be fraud or fraudulent activity. And each and every time when those questions came up, no answers were given as to how we're going to address those concerns with regards to things that were unusual or things that appeared to be fraudulent within our election system. Chain of custody, ballots, who's making them, how many extras we have. There was at least 50 questions like this. And at every corner, instead of taking each topic and each issue and solving them and explaining them, she didn't choose to do any of that. And so it left us no choice but to go to a hand count. Now, I didn't recommend spending any money on employees. Every county in California already has a hand counting process in place. Hand counting is not that hard to do. In fact, I took part in 2012 of a recount in a Reading City Council race, 30,000 ballots. We counted them by hand in 2 days. Now that was only one race, but you can expand upon that to have a very simple system of hand counting, and most of Europe now has all gone away from these machines. They've all gone away from any of the proprietary machines. So what I'm having to do today, because of AB 969, I have to purchase proprietary software that I do not get to look into. Now, after the primary in 2022, we had multitudes of election experts come into Shasta County and found fraud in various areas. We have a case with the Shasta County Sheriff's Department now pending. You have had fraud in California with election proprietary software for 20 years. And whether you like to believe that or not, it's absolutely true. So, you can believe it or you cannot believe it, but we've had the experts to show it, and we know it's true. And they cheated on my race in 2020, and it was a vote flipping scheme. And again, we asked to hand count. The state said you will use electronic tabulation and you will not hand count, period. We said, well, let's do both of them. But they'll match. What's wrong with that? Let's electronic tabulate and then we'll hand count. They'll match. It'll be a great way to back it up. They said, absolutely not. You will use electronic tabulation only and you will not hand count. So that doesn't seem very fair. If a small county in California wants to hand count, why are we not? At least we should use open source programming so we can at least look at what's happening. Right now, you're blind. You can't see what's happening. You're totally blind in this, and you're assuming that everything is correct over all these years, and they're not. And we're tired of it. And too many people are finding out about it, and it's not gonna last much longer. The cheating has to stop. People run races, and people win and they lose, but the people that work hard, that are right on the answers and right on the questions and they're working hard, they deserve to win. And in many cases, that's not what's happening. And that needs to stop. We need to have fair elections, and you don't have them when you can't look at what's happening within your systems. I was a computer programmer once when I was young, and to have a proprietary system that I must purchase one of 3 machines is incredibly insane. That's insane. I can't look in what's happening. That's not right, and that's what you're forced to do in the state of California. That's why we went away from the machines to hand count, to say we can do better. We can show the public. We have over 400 people that will volunteer to do it for free. It wouldn't cost you anything. And that's great civic involvement when you take part. You know, what we've learned out of all of this is that we have great people in Shasta County, very generous people. Very generous and great people here in Shasta County, and a lot of great patrons. People all over the country know about Shasta County. And part of it is because of the lot of work. We meet almost every week down in Reading working on election integrity. It's a serious issue. It's a serious issue because if we don't have fair elections, what's the point? What's the point? There are people in office today that should not be in office, and every decision they made should be void. And I think with the pressure and the continued pressure, we're going to fix this problem. And it might just start for the first time in Shasta County, but I can tell you at least 2 states now are going to open source programming, and they're on their way to make sure that they have fair elections. And I hope we can too. Thank you.
I think we can all agree that we want a voting system that's accurate, secure, cost-effective, and time-efficient. And I think if we look around the world, we can see that that is achieved in a hand counting system, and that's achieved with machines at times as well. And so I'm not opposed to hand counting if it can meet those 4 criteria. What I do think is problematic is that we have the ability in California to recount any election. And despite claim after claim of fraud and elections being stolen, no one has done that yet. And you know, we just had an election in Shasta Lake, Gateway School District, that you all are involved in. It was only about 2,000 voters for one single issue. It would have been very easy to recount that and see, compare it to the machines, and see if there was something off, if there was something wrong, if someone was flipping the votes. No one chose to do that. And if people say, oh, well, you have to pay for it. Well, there's clearly enough outside funding coming in to support the candidates who have made these claims that we could easily divert some of that to recount 2,000 ballots. So what I'd like to see and understand is why hasn't that recount been done? And that, I think to the extent that there is a claim with the sheriff, that is the way we should have gone from the beginning, is that if there are actual examples of fraud, that we should bring those before courts, and we should prosecute them in courts and get to the bottom of them and stop them that way. I think it's dangerous to make really large claims about someone stealing elections without saying who's doing it, how they're doing it, and then bringing that before the judicial system.
I'll take this one first.
This is for Supervisor Jones. Mr. Jones, you talk about fair elections. do you think it's fair or morally right to accept donations from people that are not residents of the county, not even residents of the state, come in and donate to candidates so they can do their TV ads and people like similar to George Soros?
Yeah, so you'll see on all my campaign ads, I've paid for everything on my ads. All my TV ads, all my mailers and all that. I've raised that money, I do fundraisers and I paid for that. That's all been money that I have solicited from Shasta County residents. So that's what you're going to see. And that's just for me personally, because I believe in being able to do that. Now, you're referring to Mr. Anselmo, who was a resident of Shasta County for 7 years. He was bullied, he was threatened, and he was extorted, and he left Shasta County never to return. Now, there's nothing I can do for Mr. Anselmo, but Mr. Anselmo is very generous, and he's also very conservative. And he has given millions of dollars across our great nation to a variety of different political PACs that are like-minded. Shasta County has at least 6 political action PACs, and he has donated to at least 2 or 3 of those, but I'm not receiving any PAC money. If you're not familiar with what happens in Sacramento, there is 1,000 PACs. And if you're going to get elected to Senate, Assembly, or Congress, you have to have all the PAC money. Millions and millions of dollars are spent every year on Assembly members, senators, and congressional members. But there's no talk about that, but there seems to be talk about a small PAC in Shasta County that are helping some conservatives get off the ground. Now, Mr. Anselmo can donate that money. He's donated wide and far, all over, to things that are important to him. And we've seen Brett Emerson and others do the same thing. Kathleen Kennedy, a movie producer in Hollywood, has done the same thing. Lots of money comes into Shasta County. You may like one person or may not like another person, but it's legal for those people to donate to a PAC. Now, the PAC is their own separate entity. They can then distribute that money, and there's nothing that Mr. Anselmo can do about that. They could give all that money to George Soros, and there's nothing that you could do to stop it. And so the PACs in town are able to accept a large donation. Donations right now are set at $5,500 for supervisor races. Now, the board could have extended that and raised that amount of money. We did not. We kept it at $5,500. In fact, we brought the issue forward to set actual real campaign finance reform and set the limit. But unfortunately, under the state rules, PACs and unions are exempt. So this playing field is not fair. They're always going to win out of Sacramento, and you know what? There's nothing we can do about it. There's nothing we can do about it. So I don't like PACs any more than the others. But if you get rid of all those in Sacramento and Washington, I'd be in favor of it. Good luck. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree that the challenge with PACs is that you can make unlimited contributions to it, and that's the problem. It's not necessarily that PACs exist; it's that you can donate $250,000, which is what we've seen here, to a PAC from a single source. And I think that's the challenge. And while Supervisor Jones has not taken any money directly, a number of the candidates that he's supported and praised for being their decisions on the board have. And also, if we look back to 2020, during that election, I think that was quite a different story. That was before the reforms that were made to the campaign. And so there, at the county level, you could accept unlimited contributions to your county race. And there was a large donation of 6 figures to his campaign, I believe. And so I agree that we should move forward. Unfortunately, some of those things are controlled by the state level. I think it's up to the responsibility of the people in the community to see if they're going to be swayed by ads that are paid for by the committees that they don't agree with, and that they don't agree with the sources of those funding. And so that's what I encourage you. All ads are required to have a disclosure at the bottom of them that says the committee that's funding them. You can look at where those funds come from. If you don't agree with where those funds come from, then don't listen to those ads.
But before that, I'll go to one of the last previously submitted question. There is a general shortage of affordable housing in the Lakehead area. This affects everyone, especially business owners who cannot find employees. What can you and the county do to correct this problem?
Well, Well, again, we've already started that, so the impact fees reduction is definitely going to help reduce the cost of housing. So we all talk about wanting to have affordable housing, but yet we have some of the highest fees in California. And if you build a house outside of California, it costs you $100,000 less than here. And it's because of the fees and the regulations that we put on that are unnecessary. You see that all over. And so again, this year, I think we've already seen the elimination, complete elimination of building impact fees. There's going to be other fees that are going to be adjusted down, and lots of regulations that are going to be eliminated that are unnecessary, and it's going to help housing costs. And I tell you, when we see a growth spurt in housing, it really trickles through the whole entire county and throughout Northern California. It helps all kinds of small businesses when everybody is doing well. We saw that before, and I'd like to get back to that. And the county is ready. We have the correct board to be able to take a look at these fees and reduce them. When we eliminated the impact fees, that was a 3-2 split. And so the majority of the board felt that was correct. 2 members of the board chose not to do that. There are histories within Shasta County of what happens when you eliminate fees or reduce fees and growth occurs. It's a one-to-one relationship. It's fairly easy. You put fees very high and you reduce the ability for people to build homes and to grow. And you know, this partially comes out of the big cities in California. They take a no growth or a low growth mentality. And so they put a lot of fees and restrictions and things. And of course, you know, the state of California is passing 1,000 laws a year. And it's costing you a lot of money, and it's pushing people out of California, good people out at an all-time rate. So we're gonna do what we can at the county level, and we're gonna push back. And yeah, I think you're gonna see a lot of that. We push back on AB 205. We're litigating the Energy Commission as we speak right now for taking away local control. We're gonna try to give back as much control as possible and make your lives better by reducing your fees and the regulations, because it's both. It's not just one or the other. It's both have to be adjusted. Thank you.
So I want to talk about impact fees, although again, as I stated earlier, I don't think that will have much of an influence on Lakehead directly, because if you look at the property that's available here, there isn't a lot of land available for development. And so even if you reduce impact fees in Lakehead, you're not going to see much development, if any, because there just isn't land for that to happen. So what I think, you know, to be honest, what we're looking at in Lakehead is that you're going to probably need to rely on more affordable housing in surrounding areas. And I think the city of Shasta Lake, about 25 minutes away, is probably, in terms of your labor pool, is probably where we're going to have to increase housing. They're going to break ground on a project next week that's going to bring, you know, more affordable housing there. And I think if we're thinking of a strategy that will work for Lakehead, it's have folks who are maybe earlier in their careers, who are not making as much money, they might need to look to Shasta Lake, where there's gonna be more abundant and lower cost housing. And so, yeah, because this is a destination town, the prices of housing are gonna be driven up by that, as you already know, I'm sure, from personal experience. And so to get affordable housing here with the constraints on space and the fact that it's a destination town, I don't think is something that could be pursued. I think instead we should pursue more affordable housing in our urban centers. The closest one here is Shasta Lake. When it comes to impact fees, you know, I'm in general a fan of reducing fees and regulation, though I think the story that's being told about their impact is more mixed than we're hearing. If you look at the city of Reading, which in 2011 suspended, well, in fact, they basically put vouchers for 50 homes that would have no fees, and then 50 additional homes. They extended partially to another 100 homes. What you see is 2 things. One, they backfilled the impact fees with grant dollars that were coming out of the Great Recession. So they already had money to cover that, which they didn't rely on sales and property tax to backfill that. And secondly, if you look at building permits, which any of you can go look this up, in 2009 and 2010, before impact fees were suspended or these vouchers were created, the number of permits was higher than it was between 2011 and 2014 when they were suspended. And then they actually increased again after the impact fees were reinstated, which the city council chose to do. So again, I'm not saying impact fees are the best thing, but in terms of a direct relation between seeing impact fees go down and building spikes go up, that is not what we're seeing in the data for City of Reading. So again, I think as a community, I would encourage us, and I know the City of Shasta Lake is working on this, increase housing stock there at an affordable price and use that as a pool for your businesses here.
Earlier on that, okay. All right. We have one last pre-submitted question for both candidates. Probably the most important one. What can you offer the Lakehead community that your opponent cannot?
Well, obviously, we have two good candidates here, and you know, to take nothing away from my opponent, but realistically, I've lived in this county my entire life. I've been up here hunting off of Sims Road, Gilman Road, Bulmers, Lemoyne. I've been all over this county. I've worked in a small business. I know what it's like in a small business in Shasta County. I've been in one for 46 years. I'm experienced, and that matters. Right now, we're in a very tough time here in the state of California. This state, as you know, wants to take control of almost everything that's happening at the board level. And we need people that have experience and tenacity, specifically with Shasta County. And that's what my opponent lacks. He's only been here for a little while working for nonprofits. I've been here for a long time, experienced with working in small businesses, not afraid of getting into the weeds on issues that are important, because that is what we do. And you know, I encourage people to come to the boardroom and see the work that we do. We've done a lot of good work last year, and we're going to be doing more work. My term, whether I'm reelected or not, I've got this whole year to continue to do the work that this board is determined to do. We have a new CEO that is excellent, and we're grateful that we hired him. We have a new deputy CEO. We have new support services, new health and service, new HHSA director, and we'll have a new county council shortly. And these new positions are really top-notch people that are really going to help Shasta County into the future. And we're gonna fight, because that's what's happening with the state of California. We're going to fight for our residents. We're passionate about it, and we're not gonna back down. I have that kind of tenacity. I have the experience here in Shasta County, and I think it's gonna pay off for all of us in the long run. Thank you.
Just to clarify one thing, I started a business here, I run a small business, so that works with businesses as well. So I'm not limited to nonprofit experience, worked for a large business as well. So beyond that, you know, in terms of what I can offer, and I don't think it's necessarily things that Supervisor Jones can't offer. I think you can evaluate for yourself whether he has offered you that over the last 4 years. And I think one of those is I intend to be part of this community, and I want to be part of the communities that I would represent. And so that's why I've come up here 4 times over the last several months. I've come to the fish fry in this community because I think it's important to get to know people and to get to know the communities that you represent. And honestly, I like this community. It's like the one that I grew up in. And so I plan to be part of this community, to show up and to be responsive to your needs, to understand them, to do, Bob told me that he would do a drive around at some point, and I'd still love to take him up on that, and actually, you know, go through and see all the different nuances to what makes Lakehead unique and not brush over it as being part of the bigger Shasta County. The other thing is that for me, when it comes to government, I believe that the frustration that some of you are feeling, and when it comes to the resident deputy issue and others, is that the government hasn't delivered results for the tax money that you're paying, or at least not to the level that we would expect. And so, you know, my opponent has had 12 years in the city of Reading, and then, not collectively, but the city of Reading 8 years, and now going on 4 years, to deliver those results. And I think you can evaluate for yourself whether those results are where you'd like them to be. I mean, you haven't gotten a resident deputy. I mean, you could apply pressure in the next 4 years, and we'll see what happens. But you already can see what has happened over the last 4 years. You can see what has happened over homelessness. To homelessness over the last 15 years. You can see what's happened to crime over the last 15 years. And that is why I decided to run, because I want to actually make progress on these challenges. I don't want to just pass policies or make new legislation or spend money. I want to see progress in the community. And that's my commitment to you. I'm not running to become a politician and become a career politician who has a lot of political experience. I don't know that we would say that political experience actually guarantees that you deliver better results to the community. And so my goal is to make progress on these challenges. If that's not possible through government, then I'll find another way to do it, whether it's government or whether it's business or nonprofit. Thanks.
Okay, other questions from the audience?
This is for Supervisor Jones. Regarding the cancellation of the Dominion contract, are you able to direct us to a balance sheet that reflects the figures that you stated to us?
Yeah, so at any time, if you like, you can call it Nora Short, she's our auditor controller, and she'll give you excellent data, and she'll tell you, in fact, it's not only the contract for 2.2 million, but she'll give you all the other pieces of money that was going to Dominion each and every year. So it added up quite a bit. Any kind of special election, they charge more money, because we lease the machines, it's all proprietary, we lease them. So talk to Nora, she'll give you every dollar, every penny. She's excellent at her job, she's very open and accessible, and if you call down there, you can talk to her directly.
Is there a document available on the county website?
You know, it's probably, it is within our budgets, and all of our budgets are posted, and so you could, if you're talented, to go through the ROV, see what we're paying each and every year, and the subsections, so, you know, the budget's that thick, but, you know, it's all in there, and you'll see the costs associated with it, and you'll see where we spent $950,000 to replace that system that we purchased outright from Heart Civic, and so it is all in there, but you might as well call Nola, she's really good, she'll kind of fast track it for you.
Thank you.
Mr. Plummer, would you want to? Other questions from the audience? I see one back here.
I actually have two questions and one comment. Thank you for coming up to Lakehead and appearing before us tonight. I myself really appreciate it. My first question is, if I'm not mistaken, we all live in a national forest. And we do have U.S. Forest Service we affectionately call pine cone cops. They should be responsible for some of the items that have been brought up here tonight. For instance, the dogs roaming about, crimes, where you need an officer right away. That guy should be available. We are in a national forest, and that's what his job is. If I'm mistaken on that, please correct me. My second question is, and maybe I'm a little off-base, but if you would each like to designate your political affiliation, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
So I've been a conservative Republican my entire life. Well, you know what, I'm still gonna push for president deputy. I do believe law enforcement in that area is a responsibility of the Shasta County Sheriff's Department. We've done them in other parts of our county. So there is a need here. I do believe you're gonna get your better service with your sheriff deputy than with a federal agency. And so I do believe it's correct and appropriate for that expenditure to have a resident deputy. And so I would still lean on that and push for that far more than law enforcement within, you know, BLM or National Forest. So they're just two different beasts, and they really do look at things differently. Our sheriff deputies are well versed in all the issues that go on within the county. I think we'll just get better service that way.
Yeah. I'm also a Republican, and yeah, I would tend to agree with Supervisor Jones in terms of the use of that, though I think it's a creative idea, and I think that their jurisdiction is probably also limited to federal land, though, you know, I'm not sure if they would have any jurisdiction over kind of private property or county property, and so that would also be a hindrance, but I think those types of ideas coming out from the community is the way that we all together can make progress on these challenges, is hearing from you all, like, you know, it might not be the right idea right out of the gate, but hearing these ideas and experimenting with them is a way that we can move forward on this.
Let me add also that typically we, the Lions Club and the Safety and Washington Group, sponsor 1 to 2 town hall type meetings per year. And that's an excellent question to ask at that time, because we usually have the Forest Service and BLM and the people representing the dam and other agencies. And at that time, we could have them respond to that question. That's a great question, because we need all the help we can get, so I'll make sure that question is on the docket.
And I don't need a microphone. I think clarification on that, I think when you call 911, they are very versed, they know whose jurisdiction it is. The Forest Service jurisdiction is mainly outside of residences and stuff like that, so they will dispatch Forest Service to certain calls if that's in their jurisdiction. But most of the stuff that happens within the town and stuff like that is gonna fall underneath the sheriff. So generally, you're gonna see the sheriff, but there's also times they'll dispatch CHP, because CHP is closer and they're on the freeways, and they'll dispatch CHP.
I think in an emergency, it doesn't matter who's the closest, so long as someone gets there fast.
And I think that's part of what they do. So yes.
I saw another hand over here now. Okay. Well, in that case, I will ask each of the two candidates. By the way, thank you both for being here. We appreciate it. Why don't we give you each maybe another 5 minutes with some closing remarks that you'd like to add?
Well, I appreciate the Lakehead Lions Club for having me and hosting this event. We're gonna have other events down the line, so you'll be able to take a look at both of us for District 4 and along other candidates for the other supervisor districts. And they're important too, because when you see a candidate that's running, all of our votes affect everyone in the county. So having good representation in every district is important, not just your own, but all the others matter to you too, because we work collectively as a board, and the majority is how it works. And so, again, I'm very proud of the work that we've done and accomplished. It was a long year, a tough year, but we got a lot done. And, you know, this board is committed to conservative ideas and listening to the public, where, you know, we've had different boards for a long time, for several decades. This is a new board, a different board, a bold board, and I'm really happy to be a part of that. We're gonna push back on the state. We're gonna try to represent the people here in Shasta County the very best way that we can. And all the majority of the board, all of those members have been in this county for a long time. They understand their districts, they understand the issues, and they're gonna fight for them. So you have a very good board down in Reading fighting for you, and each of them are concerned with their district, but we're all concerned with the county as a whole. I care what happens in Vernon. I care what happens in Cottonwood, at Lakehead, Happy Valley. These are all Shasta County residents, and we need good leaders, and we're starting to get there. We're making good progress. Another thing personally about me is that, you know, I care passionately about the environment. I've volunteered with over a dozen organizations. I've spent thousands of hours volunteering my time for conservation throughout Northern California. We've raised millions of dollars to put on the ground here in Northern California to improve things for wildlife. I've worked with a lot of different organizations, and I still work with those organizations, and we're still fighting for Northern California. And so, you know, volunteering is important. I know a lot of you volunteer as well. And so besides the work that we do at the admin center, we spend a lot of outside time volunteering for different organizations trying to improve the environment. Fire Safe Council is very important, trying to get our fuel reductions down. This is a huge issue every summer. We're not going to stop on that. Working with the various agencies trying to reduce fuels, that's a big issue. Water, I know this year probably won't be a big issue, but as you know, every 7 years or so we see drought, and that is a very big issue for us, and the state wants to take more of our water and our water rights. We saw the ACID canal, the state violated, actually the Water Resource Board violated a pre-14 water right. That's the first time that's ever happened here in Shasta County, and I think those are the kinds of things that we have to fight for, because they're ours and they're our rights. And so, you know, I appreciate this job. It's not an easy job at times. We get a lot of compliment outside the boardroom with what we do for people that actually pay attention, because a lot of the work happens behind the scenes. And unfortunately, if you read the newspaper or if you see Channel 7, you're only going to get a little picture of what's happening, and half the time it's not correct. And so I wish we had a real newspaper like we did 20 or 30 years ago, where they did really in-depth reporting. We don't have that today. It's unfortunate that we don't. But we're going to still fight for Shasta County. I'm going to fight for District 4. I've lived in Shasta first started when we came here in 1969. We came to Central Valley, and so that's where I started, and that's where I live in District 4, and that's probably where I'll die. And it's a great district, and I'm honored to serve, and I appreciate everyone's support. Hope everyone gets out and votes March 5th. Your ballots will be coming out approximately February 6th, and so you'll be able to vote at that time, so I encourage everybody to get out and vote. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here and for taking time to voice questions. I love the ability for you all just to be able to raise your hands and shout out questions, because I felt like it was more of a conversation. And this is what, I would say that I would commit to doing on an ongoing basis, is have a conversation with you where you feel like government is responsive, that you have someone who is not only part of representing your community, but is showing up, who is being present, even if there's not an official meeting or some agenda to be had, just being part of there and seeing, what is happening in the community. And that's something, I have 3 young girls, they're 5, 8, and 10, and they actually love coming to these types of events and others more than I do probably. They're very extroverted, and so, bringing them out to things like this, and I heard you had a bunny race or something? Bunny festival, okay. So they already have that on the calendar, because that's the type of thing that we want to do as a family, is be part of the community. For me, and I'll come back to it, that really making progress on the challenges that the community face is what I want to see government do. I think we've seen too long, we've seen distrust in the government, and trust in the government plummet over the last 60 years, and it's because we're paying more in taxes and we're not getting results. Now, there's always, we passed this policy, we spent this money, but is the community actually getting better? And that's where I want to see homelessness numbers actually go down. I want to see crime numbers actually go down. I want to see our road score actually go up. We have one of the highest suicide rates in the state. I want to see that go down. I'm on the Shasta County Men's Advisory Group for Suicide Prevention. So these are issues that we want to see improvement on and actually see results for the community. We've had, as Supervisor Jones alluded to, a number of good years when it came to wildfires, but we don't have to remember too far. And so work that we're doing, as I'm on the Western Shasta Resource Conservation District Board, and we're working with about 22,000 acres of U.S. Forest Service land to clear that and reduce, fuel in the forest. And so we want to see results, and that's going to be my focus. And that's what, when it comes to government, I feel like the challenge is that there's not accountability to deliver results. There's accountability to spend money. The money comes in, okay, we got to get it out the door, and to deliver services. But what I'd like to see the county do is set goals that are publicly published, and that you all can go to the county website and you can see the 5 to 10 goals, however many make sense, and you can see how we're doing on it. And so that at the end of 4 years, you could say, okay, did they actually achieve what they set out to achieve, that we as a community agreed to achieve? Because if that happens, then what the board can do is they can hold department heads accountable to deliver results. And the department heads will hold their staff. And so we can change the culture to a culture of accountability, where we're not increasing our budget from $500 million 4 years ago to $660 million, and not getting any better results. And so that's my focus, that's what I'm committed to. I feel like we can actually see progress on these challenges, and would love to talk to you after or anytime over the next few weeks if you'd like to reach out. Thanks.
Each of the candidates has some literature on the table in the back. Feel free to speak to them or grab that literature. I want to, on behalf of the Lions Club and the Community Safety and Watch organization, I want to thank you for being